Hello, and thank you for letting me film you during the STORYFEST in Second Life.
Like nowadays, the monsters all kind of turn out to be really nice. You know, you get all these like Shrek and, you know, all the other kind of Walt Disney films and that, and it's like the monsters just like misunderstood. And I thought, what happened to the good old bad guys? So I've written a really nasty monster story. And I think Pia is going to be filming me, and I'm trying to film myself while I do it, and then we're going to splice the two together if it works. Okay, so here we are. There once was a monster who was very bad. He was smelly and lumpy and cross-eyed and grumpy. He was just basically horrid. He had hair that bristled from green, warty skin. He had pustules and carbuncles and a sneery grin. And those kind of toenails that grow all bumpy and twisted, you know. In the morning he'd get up and just for fun he'd stamp on the gophers on the back lawn. A bird would be singing out on a twig, and he'd stand under it and aim a belch so big and horrendously stinky it'd blast that poor bird right off for 1.3 miles. The whole forest was full of mute birds suffering from post-traumatic shock disorder on account of the monstrously terrible burps. And all the other creatures would cower and lurk. Then he'd go huffing and grumping along, looking for any excuse to pick a bone with any poor creature that happened along. Ugh! He was just basically horrid. If Little Red Riding Hood happened to say, "I'm just visiting my granny, what a lovely day," he wouldn't politely tell her the way, he'd just say, "Ah, dinner." And he'd chomp her up with a big crunchy slurp. And of course that's why he did such terrible burps. People would hear his thumping steps, his muttering and grumbling and wheezy breaths, and all of them, be they postman or tramp or just that nice little old lady delivering leaflets for her church bazaar, would jump into bushes or climb up a lamp. And he'd rush after them, bawling, "Hip-ho and huzzah!" because he'd read those expressions in a very old book from his grandma. And no one, not policeman nor mayor, not even a traffic warden with notebook and glare, not bad boys on the street with wheels on their feet and slickety knives and pockets of weed, could stop that monster in his disgusting greed. He wasn't like Shrek, grumpy but good. He wasn't poor, misunderstood. Oh no, he was just basically horrid. So, there was a brother and sister, terrible twins. They made everyone cross. They were really a bad lot. They couldn't resist playing naughty tricks, and they'd had to split and come and hide in the forest. They wandered around looking for food, wondering at the silence and the strange smell in the murk and the gloom of those boggy, soggy, deserted woods. And they began to feel a little bit scared. The light was fading, and they were aware they had no shelter or home to call their own, nor even a cafe to sit in the warm, or a sweet shop to go nicking. No place to run, just trees and more trees, and nothing to eat, not even a bun. And then they saw through the trees a flickering light and shuffled close to catch a sight. You see, I've still got this in handwriting, so not typed up. And shuffled close to catch a sight of planks in a stack that was really a shack. It leant over sideways, propped up by a pole. It looked deserted, but for a lingering smell. It didn't look nice, and it certainly wasn't made of gingerbread. But the twins crept closer to get a look in, and there wasn't anyone to be seen, and it was getting darker and scarier outside where they were. So they went in It was scuzzy and manky and totally minging, but it had a small fire and a table and chair, and even though common sense said, "Beware, this is some horrible creature's lair," they started to look and poke around to see if at least there was any food to be found, something to eat and a place to stay, at least until the following day. And so it was that the monster came home, hungry and grumpy from a day on the roam, looking for food that wouldn't come out and let him catch it, whether he belched or threw stones or jumped up to snatch it. He just about had it. His temper was raw. He was looking for anything to gnash and claw. And when he got home, this is what he saw. Dinner. Just sitting waiting. He let out a roar. His horrible toenails gripped the floor as he got one twin in his grip. She struggled and thumped him and tried to nip his scabby fingers that poked and throttled. She looked around and thought her brother had bottled because he ran out the door and went outside. She thought he'd run off to hide. And as the monster opened his mouth wide, showing his snaggly yellowy teeth, saying, "There's nothing I like better for tea than a child I can roast and eat with a slice of toast." Back came her bro with a hammer and nails that the monster had left sitting in a pail, because he meant to get round to mending his roof, but he was always too grumpy to be in the mood. Bang, 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 in went the tacks, while the giant his lips he did smack. "Oh, scoop out your brains with an egg spoon," he drooled, and he went to hurl the little girl into his roasting pan, but down he fell with a whackety wham. All 11 of his toenails were neatly fastened, nailed toenails in a row, hammered to the thick wooden floor. In the shock of the fall, his claws he unclasped, and while sister tipped the table on the monster's back, brother gave him another whack on the heel of each foot. The monster bellowed and heaved and shook. The floorboards snapped, and up he got. And he picked up the table and threw it to block the door. The twins were trapped, one in each hand. He threw them together and tied them with ropes to the post in the middle. He tied them tight and knotted them good. They could barely breathe or move. "No, you made me really cross," he bellowed. "I'm gonna cook you hot as hot and suck your bones and nibble your giblets." He bent down close to their cowering faces and droolingly licked first one, then the other, smacking his lips and sniffing the savoury smell of their fear. And then he went out to get logs for the fire, leaving the children trussed up and tied. But these two bad kids had been in trouble before. The monster had barely got out the door, and they were wiggling and squirming and stretching and turning their nimble fingers at the knots. Once they were free, they wiped off the snot of his drooling and licking. And then they climbed up the chimney, the only way out. Bro went up first with a bit of toil, while his sis found a bottle of cooking oil. Using the ropes her brother threw down, she shimmied up and told him her plan. They hid there quietly up on the shingles till the monster came back carrying bundles of kindling. He built up his fire, crooning a song about boiling and roasting and basting and toasting, and then with a happy, monstery smile, he looked along to where his dinner was tied at the end of the room. "What?" he bellowed. "Where did they go? I was gonna fricassee them with some escargot." He hunted through his room high and low. Meanwhile his fire had started to glow, to thrum and hum and flicker and crackle. The flame was spreading from kindling to peat, and now something else was adding to heat. Down through the chimney the oil was dripping from up on the roof while Sis was tipping. Down on the ground, Bro wedged a pole against the door, and then off the two stole. Back to the woods. Job well done. They'd cooked the monster and turned round his plan. He'd been caught well and truly in his own scam. But not so quick, my smarty pants twins. That monster was only a little bit singed. And when he broke through the door and let out a roar, seeing the twins, he extended his claws. And he would have caught them, if not for the pieces of floorboard still fastened to his toes. Quick as a flash they climbed up a tree. They were nimble and fast and thought they were free, but that monster wasn't as thick as he looked. He used that tree on a regular basis to hang his victims in a state of stasis. The whole tree was covered with hooks, dangling from every branch and crook, and he had a pulley and rope to bend it down. Oh, once his meat had been well and truly hung. So he grabbed at the handle and he started to turn, lit by the flame of his shack while it burned. Blimey O'Reilly, can't this monster be killed? Will he ever be finally stilled? Oh, but what are they doing now, these two clever kids? Down and down, the trees bending low, the monster's grinning and the fire's glow. The kids are hanging on tight to a bough, rope in one hand, each ready to throw. Closer and closer to the monster's great maw. At the very last minute, each of them threw a rope lasso onto each huge ear of that green-skinned, partly singed, hungry, big monster. The other ends of the ropes were tied to the tree, and each kid managed to kick one knee of the monster as they jumped down free. He screamed, more from shock than from pain, and tried to grab them both again and let go the handle he was turning. And it ratcheted back with a clanking and churning, and with a great snap it broke right apart, and the tree went twirling like a big catapult, and the monster was dragged by his ears up high, and he flew off into the night sky. And finally, they had got rid of that horrible monster so green and so big. He cracked open the ground where he finally landed. The people of the town saw him and banded together to tackle him for once and all, who had held the whole place in his terrible thrall. Policeman, mayor and traffic warden and tramp ganged up on the monster and began to jump up and down on his head. And the little old lady with her leaflets from church said, "And that's for all those terrible burps." And the monster began to bawl and whine and cry like a big baby. "I'm misunderstood. I'm really good. You don't know the problems I've had." And they all said, "You're not good, you're just basically horrid." And they kept on pounding him with bat and stick and brolly and bag, and even the birds came and had a peck, until all that was left was a big, greasy smear and a lingering, stinky, horrible smell. And when the twins staggered into town, they were welcomed and settled down. And somehow they didn't need to play tricks and be bad kids and terrible twins. Sometimes bad can be good if you're not basically horrid. Okay, well, that kind of took me a bit longer to read than I thought.